Hello and welcome. My name is Alan and we are back with more Eats, Shoots, and Leaves. Today we are starting the chapter Cutting a Dash. So yeah, the hyphen, the dash, whichever you prefer to call it, is the punctuation we're looking at. But with that said, let's get into this. In 1885, Anton Chekhov wrote a Christmas short story called The Exclamation Mark. In this light parody of A Christmas Carol, a collegiate secretary named Paracladen has a sleepless night on Christmas Eve after someone at a party offends him by casting aspersions on his ability to punctuate in an educated way. I know this doesn't sound too promising, but stick with it. It's Chekhov. And the general rule is that you can't go wrong with Chekhov. At this party, the rattled Paracladen insists that despite his lack of a university education, 40 years practice has taught him how to use punctuation. Thank you very much. But that night, after he goes to bed, he is troubled. And then he is haunted. Scrooge-like, he is visited on his momentous Christmas Eve by the succession of specters, which teach him a lesson he will never forget. And what are these specters? They are all punctuation marks. Yes, this really is a story about punctuation. The first to disturb Paracladen's sleep is a crowd of fiery flying commas, which Paracladen banishes by repeating the rules he knows for using them. Then comes full stops, colons and semicolons, question marks. Again, he keeps his head and sends them away. But then a question mark unbends itself, straightens up, and Paracladen realizes he is stumped. In 40 years, he has had no reason to use an exclamation mark. He has no idea what it is for. The inference for the reader is clear. Nothing of any emotional significance has ever happened to Paracladen. Nothing relating, in any case, to the delight, indignation, joy, rage, and other feelings an exclamation mark is in the business of denoting. As epiphanies go, this isn't quite the same as seeing Tiny Tim's ownerless crutch propped in the ingle nook, but Paracladen is affected nonetheless. The poor pin pusher felt cold and ill at ease, as if he had caught typhus. The exclamation mark was no longer standing behind his closed eyes, but in front of him, in the room, by his wife's dressing table, and it was winking at him mockingly. Translation: Harvey Pitcher in Chekhov, The Comic Stories, 1998. What does poor Paracladen do? When he hails a cab, he spots immediately that the driver is an exclamation mark. Things are getting out of hand. At the home of his chief, the doorman is another exclamation mark. It is time to take a stand. And, signing himself into the visitor's book at his chief's house, Paracladen suddenly sees the way. Definitely, he writes his name. defiantly, he writes his name. Collegiate Secretary Yafim Parakladin, and adds 3 exclamation marks. And as he wrote those 3 marks, he felt delight and indignation. He was joyful and he seethed with rage. Take that! Take that! He muttered, pressing down hard on the pen. And the phantom exclamation mark disappears. Most of us can't remember a time before we learned to punctuate. We perhaps remember learning to read and to spell, but not the moment when we found out that adding the symbol, exclamation symbol, to a sentence somehow changes the tone of voice it was read in. Luckily, we are taught such stuff when we are young enough not to ask awkward questions, because the way this symbol turns, I can't believe it, into I can't believe it, is the sort of dizzying convention that requires to be taken absolutely on trust. Of my own exclamation mark history, which is not one to be proud of, all I can clearly recollect of its early days is that the standard keyboard of my manual typewriter in the 70s, in which I did my first typing, did not offer an exclamation mark. You had to type a full stop, then backspace, and type an apostrophe on top of it. Quite the deterrent to excessive punctuation, Mr. Remington. But in fact, of course, all one's resourceful backspace shift key efforts only added to the satisfaction of seeing the emphatic little black blighter sitting cheerfully on the page. This chapter is about the expressive, attention-seeking punctuation that cuts a dash, punctuation that can't help saying it with knobs on, such as the exclamation mark, the dash, the italic. Of course, the effect of such marks can be overly relied on. Of course, they are condemned by Gertrude Stein, strange woman. Yet I can't help thinking, in its defense, that our system of punctuation is limited enough already without us dismissing half of it as rubbish. I say we should remember the fine example of Parakladin, who found catharsis in an exclamation mark, and also in the French 19th century novelist Victor Hugo, who, when he wanted to know how Les Miserables was selling, reportedly telegraphed his publisher with the simple inquiry question mark and received the expressive reply exclamation mark. Everyone knows the exclamation mark, or exclamation point as it is known in America. It comes at the end of a sentence, is unignorable and hopelessly heavy-handed, and is known in the newspaper world as a screamer, a gasper, a startler, or, a dog's cock. Here's one. And here's another. In humorous writing, the exclamation mark is the equivalent of canned laughter. F. Scott Fitzgerald, that well-known knockabout gig man, said it was the laughing at your own jokes. And I can attest there is only one thing more mortifying than having an exclamation mark removed by an editor. An exclamation mark added in. Despite all the efforts of the typewriter manufacturers You see, the exclamation mark has refused to die out. Introduced by humanist printers in the 15th century, it was known as the note of admiration until the mid-17th century and was defined in a lavishly titled 1680 book, Treatise of Stops, Points, or Pauses, and of Notes, which are used in writing and print. Both very necessary to be well known, and the use of each to be carefully taught in the following rhyming way. This stop denotes our sedan admiration of what we read or write or give relation, and is always called an exclamation. Ever since it came along, grammarians have warned us to be wary of the exclamation mark, mainly because even when we try to muffle it with brackets, it still shouts, flashes like neon, and jumps up and down. In the family of punctuation, where the full stop is daddy and the comma is mummy, and the semicolon quietly practices the piano with crossed hands, the exclamation mark is the big attention deficit brother who gets overly excited and breaks things and laughs too loudly. Traditionally, it is used in involuntary ejaculations. Phew! Lord love a duck! To salute or invoke. Oh, mistress mine, where are you roaming? To exclaim or admire. How many goodly creatures are there here? For drama. That's not the Northern Lights, that's Manderley. To make a commonplace sentence more emphatic. I could really do with some opal fruits. Or to deflect potential misunderstanding of irony. I don't mean it. Personally, I use exclamation marks for email salutations where I feel a Dear Jane is over formal. Jane! I write, although I am beginning to discover this practice is not universally acceptable. I suppose the rule is only use an exclamation mark when you are absolutely sure you require such a big effect. H.W. Fowler said, an excessive use of the exclamation marks is a certain indication of an unpracticed writer or of one who wants to add spurious dash of sensation to something unsensational. On the other hand, it sometimes seems hurtful to suppress the exclamation mark when, after all, it doesn't mean any harm to anyone, and it's so desperately keen. But yeah, we'll go ahead and end that episode there. Yeah, let's go back. The author more or less talks a lot about the usages of the exclamation mark, how it's been described in history. Said it was first introduced by humanist printers in the 15th century, which is 1600s? Or 1400s? 1400s. And a note of admiration until the mid-17th century, which 1600s, because they note the book was from 1680. But yeah, the exclamation mark truly is one of those. It puts emotion into writing because it's more than just someone saying something. They are expressing themselves definitively. But yeah, apparently the author says this chapter will be about exclamation marks, the dash, like I said, dash hyphen, and the italic, which is actually a way of writing the words. Often you see them italicized, which they're put at that slanted angle. But yeah. But we'll go ahead and end the episode there. As always, educate thyself, think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.